The documents of the church that most inform my thoughts about science and religion, I guess the primary one is Pope Leo XIII on the interpretation of sacred scripture. He's basically formulating a response to Darwinism in an encyclical where he says famously that truth cannot contradict truth, that perhaps the interpretation of sacred scripture is wrong, or perhaps the polemical discussion itself is wrong. But either way, not to give up the contest of looking for truth, because truth cannot contradict truth. The world itself, what we learn about the world through science, is a reliable guide to understanding God better. Another person I like to rely on is Thomas Aquinas. In his Summa contra the Gentiles, he says that the person who thinks it doesn't matter what he knows about creation so long as he knows God well is completely wrong, because a misunderstanding about creation necessarily leads to a misunderstanding about God. So if we don't understand the creation, and that means through a scientific lens as well as our own experience, we don't understand God as fully as we possibly could. Go further back, there is St. Augustine, who tells us that God is written clearly in the creation itself. He says, look at the stars, look at the world around you, look at it, note it. God never wrote anything as clearly as that book of creation. All of these, going all the way back to, and the last one I'll mention, is Psalm 19, when we're told the heavens are telling the glory of God. If we believe that's true, then we should be listening to the heavens and what they're telling and investigate what we hear from them so that we can understand the creation and the Creator much better.
Our course, Creation and Science, relies heavily on the magisterium of the Church. We look at the writings of the ecumenical councils, as well as the writings of the popes of the 20th century. The 20th century popes have given great attention to the role of science in the life of the church and the life of society in general. And so the students are asked to read various selections from the magisterium, as well as non-magisterial documents. In particular, Cardinal Ratzinger, before he was elected to the papacy, gave a series of beautiful homilies reflecting on the Catholic theology of creation, and Ignatius Press has collected them in a book form, and so the students take a look at that.
The course that Dr. Ed Kachik and myself are going to be teaching at St. Mary's Seminary is entitled The Transfigured Brain, the relationship between neuroscience, ritual, and mysticism. I think probably the documents that have influenced us the most, at least in terms of our responsibilities at the seminary, are Pastores Dabo Vobis and the Program for Priestly Formation, both of which call for our seminarians and for all priests to have a well-rounded formation that is going to engage all of the fields of inquiry that are a part of better understanding our human life. So those documents especially, I think, sort of inspire us to be a part of this dialogue between faith and science. In terms of our specific course, one of the documents that has particularly influenced us is the Catechism of the Catholic Church. In Article 2014, we are told that essentially all people are called to be mystics. The document in that particular article speaks of spiritual progress as moving always towards greater intimate union with Christ, and that union with Christ and then ultimately with the triune God comes about through a participation in Christ's mystery, which is particularly accessed for us through the sacramental and liturgical life of the Church. So the liturgy and the sacraments are access points to the Christian mystical life. And we're going to be exploring how liturgy and liturgical ritual, how sacramental practice, and how the various Christian mystical practices might help someone to come to a deeper experience of that union with God. Because the article says that everyone essentially is called to be a mystic, that means that there has to be a common foundation for this call, not just in our faith experience, but in who we are as human beings. that all human beings have a relationship with God, whether we recognize that or not, and that God has created us for God's own self. So our interest is trying to see what's happening in some of the recent research that neuroscientists are doing with regard to spiritual practices and ritual involvement, because some of those studies support the idea that, in fact, God is very actively involved in human life, and that God is inviting us to a deeper union with God's own self, and that, in fact, ritual and spiritual practices can transform the human person, and especially our own consciousness, so that we come to a deeper human consciousness of our relationship with God and with others and with the world around us.